you bring up the point, I thought about it earlier to mention as well, of just listening to your body and saying what it wants. Because just because everyone's is eating, I don't know, salad or whatever, mint things, the cooling things that I mentioned, you might need more warmth. Some people are still, even though they've come through spring in the wood element, they're still feeling, there's still coldness trapped in their body. And the fire element is actually about hydration that I've mentioned as well, but also circulation. So that, the heart is responsible for circulation, and a lot of people will still have cold hands and feet through summer. So that's a perfect example of what you just said. Like, you might need cinnamon, you might still need to have some of those warming herbs and tonics and things like that, because you're still cold on the inside, even though it's 30 degrees, 40 degrees outside. So it is very much listening to your body and what it needs. And just because Kimberly is talking about cooling foods, maybe it's not going to work for you because you're not warmed up yet, actually.
I think it's I mean, I've talked about it before with before our acupuncturist moved away. He was Tani did kind of like, Tani was vegetarian for so long, but maybe not with your principles in place. I know you help people do this in a way without meat, but after Tani came through, she was quite depleted, especially within her spleen, and our acupuncturist was like, hey, listen, I know you want to live super seasonally, but you've been off the elemental cycle for so long, it's probably going to be 2 to 3 years of you camped out within the spleen, grounding diet. Don't, just because it's summer, don't run off and just smash a bajillion mangoes and think that you can just go and enjoy the fruits of summer when you haven't actually, I mean, I'm putting it a little bit more bluntly than he did. You haven't put in the time. You're not listening to your body. You haven't put in the time. I kind of feel like this with a lot of people I see. It's like, well, it's going to take you a long time before you've got the capacity to warm yourself up and heat yourself up before you can actually go nuts in summer. But you haven't, because the foundations of the diet haven't been created. And as we said before we jumped on, yes, there's, a different principles within each season, within each organ, but they are connected by something. There is a continuity that's there, and you kind of have to cultivate that and know and feel that, and know what your baseline markers are. You need to know what your edges are so you don't get exhausted. You need to know how to feel whether you are cold. You need to be able to perceive what the difference is between you living in a way where you can heat your feet and your hands and not. And then so maybe you might not be completely exploding into summer or out there into autumn, but you will be learning from the principles as we go along. It's an important one. Yeah,
absolutely. And some people, they bring up a great point, because some people, like, they might be listening and thinking, especially at the beginning when we're talking about this explosive energy and warmth, and they're like, I don't feel that, I'm flat or cold, and it might take 3 years for somebody to warm up or to feel that energy of summer, because they haven't had that for so long. Or you live in a really cold place and your summer is really short, and it takes a lot more energy to get to that fireness. So we need to be very mindful of your climate, your individual constitution, and your condition of where you're living. Someone who's listening, maybe if they're in Singapore or Hong Kong or Mexico, where it's much warmer the whole year, that's a different story, right? You're going to have different foods and different hopefully you're not having cold hands and feet in a very warm climate. That might actually be an indication of even more severe cold on the inside. But circulation is really important as well in summer. So you mentioned getting up and moving. So exercise and sweating, because one of the biggest problems with dampness, and I'd love to talk about that as well, even though it's more earth element, we can have that at any time of the year. But if it's not being expressed out of the body through sweating, and it doesn't have to be a gym session. Most people think of sweating in that terms, but you can go for a walk in summer and still sweat, or you can just dance or do something fun that encourages that energy of upward, outward, but also the sweating. But you mentioned mango, so that's why it brought my attention back to dampness. So in summer we tend to enjoy lots of fruit, which is great, but you can overdo that as well. And a lot of the raw fruit in summer, particularly mangoes and bananas, tropical fruits and those two will, for someone who has dampness issues, which is a stagnation in the spleen, and then it can move up to the lungs as well when you get mucus. So we want to keep that clean and not being bogged down. So I liken dampness to being like a swamp or a steam room in your digestive system. And it's a very unusual term for us in the West, but something to just keep in mind. And I actually personally think there's a lot of gut issues and IBS and things around that. Whereas if you tie that into Chinese medicine, you're like, well, that makes sense. It's just like this bogged down, moist, not nice, not pleasant environment. So sweating is really key, having the right food. So just reducing your mangoes or bananas and dairy for a while, and having a lot of those foods that I mentioned earlier, actually, those bitter flavors, a little bit of cooked foods, and dampness removing foods such as koix seeds or jobs tears. So they're around, you can get them in Australia quite easily. And I didn't mention corn yet, but corn is a really nice summer vegetable, and corn silk, which is the hair of the corn, is a really nice thing just to boil the whole corn with that hair and then drink the water. That is like one of the best ways to get dampness out of it. You just pee more. It's fantastic. But again, keeping that water and fluid metabolism balanced and moving, and not overburdening your spleen is key in summer, as well as late summer. Excuse me, but very important in this hot weather.